There is outrage and a sense of vindication tonight among conservative groups. The IRS has admitted targeting some of those groups for scrutiny during the 2012 election season.
They used names like Tea Party or Patriots, and they selected cases simply because the application had those names in the title.
Mr. Schulman, when you learned that conservative groups were being targeted by the IRS for discriminatory treatment, what did you do? Did you do anything to verify that the practice, as insidious as it was stopped?
The Inspector General was going to be looking into it, and that's where
Is it that you can't say yes or no, or you're just choosing not to say yes or no? Can you answer the question, did you do anything personally to make sure that this insidious, discriminatory practice was stopped? Yes or no?
The procedures that I inherited and that my
Mr.
general
Schulman,
practice
this is going to go much quicker if you'll answer yes or no, and then you can explain.
I don't have all the facts, and I don't know the scope and severity.
Did you investigate the facts, Mr. Schulman? Did you lift a finger to identify the facts?
Felt very comfortable. The facts, the Inspector General was going to run down the facts, and once he had it, it would be reported out.
Let the record reflect that's a no.
On the Benghazi
probes about Benghazi.
The Benghazi committee is.
You wouldn't have had your Benghazi situation.
Intelligence sources have, in fact, confirmed exclusively to Fox News that 100 men took part in what they are calling a coordinated assault on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi.
Good morning. Every day, all across the world, American diplomats and civilians work tirelessly to advance the interests and values of our nation. Often, they are away from their families. Sometimes they brave great danger. Yesterday, 4 of these extraordinary Americans were killed in an attack on our diplomatic post in Benghazi. Among those killed was our ambassador, Chris Stevens.
CIA officers on the ground in Benghazi during the attack sent requests for help, but were denied.
We know that there was a drone, guys, that was over Benghazi with a live feed of what was going on the ground. Where was that feed going, Colonel?
The feed was actually 2 drones, and they're also listening on a telephone to the State Department, and they're also listening on a military secured channel from the CIA on the ground to the CIA in Langley. But the feeds you're talking about go to about 15 different headquarters, starting with Europe Command, to the National Military Command Center, to the White House Situation Room, to the CIA, and on and on. All right. A massive amount of information visually was going on instantaneously while this was happening.
This is going on from 9:40 until after 4 in the morning. Do you need the president to approve a military intervention?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. The Secretary of Defense gives the order, approved by the White House, period. That's the only person that can do it.
All right. Do we know if the president watched this?
I hate to say this. According to my sources, yes, he was one of those in the White House Situation Room in real time watching this. And the question becomes, what did the president do or not do in the moments he saw this unveiling? Only he could issue a directive to the Secretary of Defense Panetta to do something.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
To call it a rough week for the Obama administration might be an understatement. As we have reported last week, a huge scandal broke when the IRS admitted to unfairly targeting Tea Party and liberty groups seeking nonprofit status. On the heels of that, a new scandal regarding the hacking of journalists' phones. And all of it as the investigation into Benghazi continues to break.
The useless Department of Homeland Security is keeping tabs on who is saying what on the conservative side of the aisle. Now, you say, well, they're monitoring all journalists. Nonsense. They're monitoring the minuscule small number of people who speak out against this government when this government steps out of line. And remember, it's the job of the people to keep the government in order. A government that is not kept in check will become an out-of-control rogue government.
Congress is trying to figure out who's to blame for the collapse of Solyndra, the solar panel company that filed for bankruptcy last week after running through more than $500 million of taxpayer stimulus money.
At this time, will you both please rise and raise your right hand, and I will swear you in. And I need you to make sure your mic's on, if you don't mind. Okay. Do you both swear that the testimony that you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Thank you, Mr. Stover. The chairman recognizes himself for questioning of the witnesses, and I should be less than 2 minutes, hopefully. Mr. Harrison and Mr. Stover, was every document and piece of information you submitted to the Department of Energy and the White House Office of Management and Budget, the United States Congress, and your investors accurate, complete, to the best of your knowledge?
Mr. Chairman, I have tremendous respect for this subcommittee and the important oversight role that it plays. As much as I wish to be able to answer the members' questions, I have been advised by my counsel that it is the better course for me to assert my constitutional right to decline to answer questions under the Fifth Amendment. While I hope to have an opportunity to assist this committee's inquiry in the future, on the advice of my attorney, I must respectfully decline to answer any questions put forth to me by this committee.
Mr. Stover.
Mr. Chairman, on the advice of my counsel, I must invoke the privilege afforded by the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Solyndra, this is a loan guarantee program that predates me, that historically has had support from Democrats and Republicans as well. Solyndra, this is a loan guarantee program that predates me. Solyndra, this is a loan guarantee program that predates me, that historically has had support from Democrats and Republicans as well.
President Obama had to answer for Solyndra, the solar panel company which failed despite $500 million in government loans from the Energy Department. President Obama had held it up as a model for green jobs and clean energy.
Do you regret that?
No, I don't.
This company had been heralded as a success story of the stimulus program. So by any measure, its collapse is an embarrassment to the White House.
I assume by now that everyone in this room knows about the Fast and Furious scandal. Essentially, short version is the Obama Justice Department funneled 2,000 AK-47 style, 50 caliber rifle style weapons into Mexico. Didn't tell the Mexican government about it, and then 2 of those weapons showed up at the murder scene of one of our Border Patrol agents. From the beginning, the administration has tried to cover up every aspect of this down to the fact of the connection between the Border Patrol agent Brian Terry's murder being connected to this government program.
Officials at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms encourage gun shops to sell thousands of assault rifles and other weapons destined for Mexican drug cartels.
When you realize that the federal government has essentially been arming these cartels, what goes through your mind?
We feel it's a betrayal. 42,000 people have been killed, and these weapons that our own government facilitated to these violent criminals in Mexico, 200 plus people we know have been killed by them. So there's responsibility for that. 200 plus. And we also now have our hero in the Border Patrol, as you know, Agent Brian Terry, killed on American soil. 3 guns have been found at the murder scene. All 3 of them were connected to this program. And so for us, I'm fearful, not just my deputies, other officers, citizens in America, that we're going to be facing the barrels of guns that have been put in the hands of the most violent criminals in North America. And who's going to be held accountable?
I want to read something that you said, or quoted as saying, if somebody gives a gun to somebody knowing they're going to commit murder, guess what we call them? We call them accomplices. Do you think the ATF have been accomplices to murder?
Absolutely.
So you're saying what they were doing was criminal?
Absolutely. Not just these individual agents, but people up the chain of command who have made the decision. The U.S. Attorney for Arizona just resigned. And this is a big deal. Now it's one step away from Eric Holder. This is his Department of Justice, and there are people who have lost their lives. We have broken countless treaties with our neighbor, Mexico, And we have a hand and responsibility in this violence that has come to the United States. But more importantly, Mexico is our partner. They're not our enemy. And we facilitated guns into the cartels that have worked to topple the Mexican government.
From a law enforcement standpoint, I mean, did this operation make any sense at all?
It doesn't. Where it came from is this concept when we allow drugs or cash or sometimes a criminal walk. We may watch a crime in progress where we can take lawful action. We allow that criminal to go in an effort to watch it spiderweb and to see how many people we can catch. They use the same concept with weapons, and this is pure insanity.
The greatest failure we've had with regards to gun violence in some respects is what is known as Fast and Furious, which was a program under this administration, and how it worked exactly, I think we don't know precisely, but where thousands of automatic and AK-47 type weapons were given to people that ultimately gave them to drug lords. They used those weapons against their own citizens and killed Americans with them. And this was a program of the government. For what purpose it was put in place, I can't imagine. But it's one of the great tragedies related to violence in our society, which has occurred during this administration, which I think the American people would like to understand fully. It's been investigated to a degree, but the administration has carried out executive privilege to prevent all the information from coming out. I'd like to understand who it was that did this, what the idea was behind it, why it led to the violence. Thousands of guns going to Mexican drug lords.
Now all these guns are nowhere to be found, and for years this will haunt the conscience of America rightly.
Ordinary men and women are too small-minded to govern their own affairs. Progress can only come when individuals surrender their rights to an all-powerful sovereign.